So finally, here I am with a review of the Realme X7. After using heavyweights like the Mi 10i and the Samsung Galaxy F62, the Realme X7 feels like a breath of fresh air with its smaller and ergonomic design. Initially, I was a little skeptical about the phone because it is eerily similar to the Realme 7 Pro, which was launched in India about 6 months ago. But after using it for 3 weeks or so, I have grown to like it. Okay, first off, the design of this phone is really good. Like I mentioned earlier, it is one of the lightest phones on the market. At just 8.1 mm, it is quite thin as opposed to the Mi 10i and the Galaxy F62. The back panel is, however, made of plastic, so over time you will see scratches and spots like we did with our Realme 7 Pro unit. So I do recommend you put a skin instead of a case here. On the front, the Realme X7 has the same 6.4 inches display size as that of the 7 Pro. Realme has installed a really good AMOLED panel here. The colors are nice to look at and the touch sensitivity is great as well. Brightness-wise, I wish it was a little brighter, especially while using outdoors, but it's nothing unsettling. Yet, seeing how the recently announced Redmi Note 10 Pro comes with a 120Hz AMOLED panel, this one now feels like a compromise with its 60Hz refresh rate. If not 120Hz, Realme should have at least given a 90Hz panel here. But nonetheless, the Realme X7's display is still top quality. And you also get a super fast in-display fingerprint sensor instead of a side-mounted capacitive fingerprint sensor. So the unlocking experience, especially because of its small form factor, has been great. Okay, comparing it side by side against the recently launched Galaxy A32, the fingerprint sensor is really fast here, which in my opinion adds to the premium experience. Likewise, I've also liked the overall performance of this device. The Dimensity 800U chipset inside is on par with the Snapdragon 750G in terms of benchmarks, and it's finally great to see tough competition between MediaTek and Qualcomm in the mid-range segment. As for real-life performance, I am very satisfied with its performance so far. Despite installing over 100 apps, the UI feels optimized, apps load fast, and multitasking with recently opened apps is pretty swift. Realme occasionally puts unused apps to sleep for better battery endurance, so when you try to relaunch an app after some time, it will reload. But other than that, the performance is good for the price, and yes, it is definitely better than the Snapdragon 720G or the Snapdragon 732G powered phones for sure. Okay, moving on to the gaming performance, it's quite identical to that on the Xiaomi Mi 10i. In PUBG Mobile, you will get a stable 40 FPS in smooth graphics and ultra frame rates with 100% stability. MediaTek chipsets are infamous for having a relatively poor thermal performance, but I did not face such an issue here. Plus, the battery drain after the gameplay was not that significant either. I also played a lot of Call of Duty on this phone, and although its highest setting is slightly lower at medium graphics and high frame rates compared to what the Mi 10i and Galaxy F62 can hit, the gameplay did not lag or stutter. Similarly, I did not encounter any issues while playing other demanding games like Asphalt 9 or Critical Ops either. Anyways, let's talk about the cameras now, and for the most part, they do not disappoint. It's not extraordinary, but still on par with the Mi 10i. As you can see from these images, they both look quite similar and the color science is similar in many scenarios too. However, the Realme X7 processes the HDR better than the Mi 10i. The 108 megapixel primary lens on the Mi 10i also struggles with the close-up shots and often comes out less sharp, whereas that's not the problem with the Realme X7's images. Portrait shots are also livelier with better skin tone on the Realme X7. Likewise, here too, Realme's HDR is slightly better, but edge detection could use some work. Another area where the Realme X7 performs better is in the selfie department. Once again, the HDR is better on the X7 and portrait selfies look livelier than you get on the Mi 10i. However, like with any other mid-range phone, the Realme X7 does not do a very good job during videos or low-light photos either. Indoor images usually don't come out sharp if your hands are not steady, and nighttime images are quite noisy too. And unlike what we see on flagship phones, the night mode shots are not that great either. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, its video shooting capabilities are strictly average too. There's no stabilization in 4K 30fps videos. And although the 1080p 60fps and 30fps recording options do improve the stabilization, it's still not quite as good as say 2 or 3-year-old flagships from Samsung and Apple. Okay, so just like the back cameras, the selfie videos look average too. The maximum you can go is 1080p at 30 fps resolution, and the stabilization does not look that proper. So I guess if you're into vlogging or making videos, you will need to use a gimbal. What's also average here are the mono speaker and vibration motor. It does not get dual speakers like the Realme 7 Pro or the Redmi Note 10 Pro. As a result, you don't get that immersive sound experience. However, the audio quality is not that bad and it does not distort at highest volumes like we noticed with the Realme 7 Pro. And as you might have already known, you don't get a microSD card slot and a headphone jack with this phone. As for microSD, well, I haven't used it on a smartphone for years, but the lack of a 3.5mm headphone jack could be a letdown for gamers because now they will have to live a dongle life or buy a low latency wireless earphones which do not come cheap. But since I am not an avid mobile gamer, I personally don't mind getting myself a Realme Buds Air 2, which looks like a good value-oriented TWS. Anyway, this brings us to the battery life. With its 4300 mAh cell, which by the way is not considered a big battery by today's standard, I still managed to get a full day of endurance almost every day. And you know that I use my phones rigorously, so considering its smaller battery capacity, I am quite surprised with its battery endurance. Realme also ships the phone with a 65-watt fast charger, which takes the phone from 0 to 100% in around 50 minutes. However, the actual charging speed here is limited to 50 watt only, so it is not as fast as the Realme X7 Pro, which utilizes the full capacity of its 65-watt charger and charges its 4500 mAh battery in some 35 minutes. To conclude, despite its shortcomings like the lack of a 120Hz screen and a 3.5mm headphone jack, I really like the Realme X7. It's quite the underrated phone in the world of big, heavy and spec-centric smartphones. It nails the basics, the 5 pillars of a great smartphone: the design, check; display, check; cameras, check; performance, check; and finally, battery life, check. But since the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max and the Realme 8 Pro will be available pretty soon, it is only plausible to wait and get that instead, or see if the company drops the price of the Realme X7, which will make it an even better value. So that was all for our review of the Realme X7. Do subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss on our awesome videos. Till then, I'm Pratima and I'll see you in the next video.